Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Isotopic Chats. Today, it's April 9th, 2026, and I'm bound to freeze at some point in this because I have poor Wi-Fi today, but I'm joined by some of my good friends, Kurt Steuck, Ann Price, and Jesse Metcalfe. We are talking about subcontracting from the perspective of being contractors and working with others. Um, we don't know why my Wi-Fi keeps freezing. I've reset everything a couple of times, but it's bound to happen. So at some point in the middle of this video, I'm just gonna go be in one of those funny positions. Maybe it just happened. Anyhow, we are why don't we start by just going around the horn and let each of our folks introduce themselves and talk about how they've been involved with subcontracting, either as a subcontractor to others or how they've involved subcontractors with their work. So Kurt, why don't you kick it off?
Hi, I'm Kurt Steuck. I've had a small business, an LLC, as corporation. Been in program evaluation specifically since 2012, but in education and training for 40 some years now. Um, we hire subcontractors on occasion. Well, I'll get into that more. We have a small business. We're converting it over to a nonprofit. We just did our launch last 2 weeks ago, the Center for Program Evaluation and Research. So if you connected with me on LinkedIn, you've probably seen a lot of obnoxious posts, but we're just starting our search for the executive director. So we're kind of at that startup stage with this, but I'm rolling my company into the nonprofit. So I'll talk more about subcontracting later. Ann?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Ann Price. I'm president and founder of Community Evaluation Solutions. I'm based in the Metro Atlanta area. Been in business since 2004. That is crazy. I am the best boss I have ever had. Highly recommend it. Yeah, I've been using subcontractors since about 2000, to the year 2000, 2020, year 2000, 2020. Yeah, and we'll talk more about maybe why I made that decision and some of the results, but I will popcorn it over to Jess and get her in here while we're waiting for Matt.
Everyone. I'm Jess Metcalfe. I am based in Vermont. My company is called Green Mountain Evaluation. We have been in business for just over 5 years now, and I did work as an independent consultant, just as a sole proprietor before that. I did, do a lot of my early work. I think the ratio has shifted for me over time. So initially, a lot of my work was being a subcontractor for other smaller independent consultants who needed, an extra pair of hands. And over time, that ratio has shifted where I do still do some work as a subcontractor, but I probably have more projects that I am running myself and having subcontractors work for my company. So I've been kind of on both sides of that equation. And I'm definitely, a subcontractor fan. I like to, trust my collaborators and let them run with things and, not micromanage. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. But yeah, the only W-2 employees I have are family members who help me out with little things here and there that I need done on specific, time frames or, plan to do a lot of oversight with.
Well, I have you on the line, Jesse, and I'm back with solid Wi-Fi. I've already lost it, and when you came back, Jesse, how do you identify contractors to support your work? Do you have regular subcontractors, or do you rotate a lot of people in? How do you think through this process?
Yeah, I do have a regular kind of bench of folks that I work with. Maybe there's, I don't know, 10 people total who I know I can reach out to and say, hey, would you like to be included on this project or this proposal? I'm really familiar with their work and their areas of expertise. I will freely admit that I've probably met almost every one of those folks through this group, right? Either through this chat or, maybe some of the other spaces like Ann's office hours. So I would say the vast majority of folks I have met through this space. as well as a couple collaborators that I have back from my days in academia. So I have some collaborators who I knew in grad school, some folks who were students that I mentored while I was in academia who have since, finished up their PhDs and gone on to start their careers. So a couple of my subcontractors are folks that I've, known from way back at my time in the university, but otherwise I find a lot of people in this group. And if I ever have a project or a proposal that needs an area of expertise that is not included, on that kind of standard bench of 10 people, then this group is a great place to go. Every once in a while, I'll refer back to the spreadsheet that we have from our subcontracting fair if I'm looking for something really specific, or even the video recording of that session where I can kind of, look for some specific areas of expertise.
Quick things that you just said. We do have a list of the people who did the shared something about themselves 2 months ago, and we will be sending that out probably with this video. And we are developing out a pretty simple dashboard that you can do a search for people who of the people who submitted. We have some ideas to do something bigger, but we're not quite there yet. Another thing I want to point out is Jesse talked about how she met people through this group. And so that's another reason to show up and connect with one another, because you never know where it's going to go. It's a great marketplace and meeting place for people to see each other and learn more about one another. And you've got you're off mute. I see you there in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. So why don't you share a little bit about how you think about identifying contractors to support your work?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So yeah, similar to Jess, largely through, let's just start with AEA, right? Even before the IC chat. So relationships that I've had through the American Evaluation Association for a long time. Then, of course, the IC chat. Actually, full disclosure, Jess, if you don't mind me sharing, Jess is one of my subcontractors, right? And I picked her out of the Hollywood Squares in 2020 as like, oh, shining star. I want her on my team, right? Yeah, and then I would say through AEA, our local Atlanta affiliate, sometimes people will just reach out to me. I can think of another subcontractor who moved into the Atlanta area, had worked with a pretty, I would say, a pretty well-known mid-sized firm, and just reached out to me, and we had lunch, and yeah, so through AEA in some form or fashion. Yeah, Kurt, you want to go?
Okay, yeah, my turn. So I thought about this, and to put it in context, in my company and the center, there are 5 full-time people and 13 contractors. So I really believe in the contracting model, subcontracting model. But I was starting to think about what was the pattern, and there's 2. One is it's based on my needs. So we have one big project that is a teacher recruitment, teacher preparation, grow your own. And I hired one of my bicycle buddies who was in a school district for years. She's not an evaluator, but she's a domain expert in that field. We hired 2 sociologists who know ripple effect mapping. They are in the AEA community. Hired another one who had experience with nonprofits and higher education. So I have a core of consultants who are specialized in certain areas. And Eva we wrote a proposal together because I needed her expertise. It wasn't accepted. Becky and I wrote a proposal together, and that also wasn't accepted. But those are examples where I was looking for specific domain expertise. And I like Jess's comment about Hollywood Squares. In Hollywood Squares like this, you have to identify to the others what makes you unique.
Mm-hmm.
What are your sources of expertise? And ripple effect mapping was one of them that made these other people stand out. So one is I pick people based on their domain expertise and what my needs are for each of the different projects. The second one is we have surges. So I get a lot of reports due at one time. So in the past, we used to interview between 100 and 150 undergrads in the month of March and April. My team just can't handle that. So we would bring other people on board to handle the search. And then it's not as much as what domain you're in, it's your communication skills and your writing skills. Can you do a good job interviewing undergraduates or graduate students or whatever participants we're working with, and then be able to write it? And in full disclosure, Jess was also one of my surge people for like 3 summers, early on, pandemic kind of thing. And so when we have the surges, then we bring people on board for a very specific project, interview, write up the report kind of thing. So domain expertise and surges are the 2 times that we hire subcontractors.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And that's the benefit of a subcontracting model that I switched to, I think I mentioned in 2020, right? So you can expand and contract your team as you need to and tap into specific content expertise that you may or may not have. Yeah.
Oh, and one of the other questions is, do we return to the same people? When I find a competent person, yes, I do. Jess, you worked with us for 3 summers, something like that, but it was just, on a couple of projects each of the summers. But I've had another consultant that the same kind of thing. He worked on a couple of projects with me. So it just depends on, again, the match of the qualifications of the person and what I need, whether I bring them back or not.
Yeah. Yeah, and to answer that part of the question, yeah, probably like Jess, I probably have a pool of probably 10 to 15 contractors that I use, some more frequently than others, depending on the project size and the content expertise. But I'm always looking. Yeah.
One thing I'm hearing is there's a kind of a, I wouldn't say personal, but definitely you have a close relationship, one that is based upon trust, and you're developing this trust relationship. I guess I don't have any questions specific to that. I guess I'll move on to the next question that I have for you guys. But it sounds like once you find a good person that you can trust, you're going to probably do repeat work with them because you kind of have this working relationship. The next question I have is, how do you determine compensation? Is it like a percentage of a job? Is it they tell you hourly what they charge and you go that way? How do you think about that? And I just had you, so why don't you respond on how you coordinate the compensation for your subcontractors?
Well, we do fixed price contracting. We use value-based budgeting. So our subcontracts are also fixed price contracts. So there is a cost of doing business that you have to think about when you're putting together, when you win a proposal, let's say, so what the business, well, I hope you do, what the business needs to make. But I try to compensate my contractors fairly. And I've worked really hard over the last couple of years to increase their hourly rate. Now, sometimes it's a little less than I would like if we just don't have that flexibility, which is why, larger projects are so beautiful and so many different ways. But yeah, so it depends on their level of their expertise, time in, just experience level. But they're all pretty similar in what I pay them, actually.
Jesse, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I follow a pretty similar approach to Anne. I do fixed price contracts with my clients, so I think that whenever I can, I try my best to mirror whatever the structure is with the main contract. Because the same way that, I don't want my clients to be surprised with unexpected costs, the same is true between me and subcontractors. So I don't want them to expect a lot of work and then there's less, or, me to expect a certain budget for them and then it, ends up blowing up for one reason or another. I don't necessarily have them track hours in a way that like gets reported back to me, but I do ask them to let me know, we'll kind of make some estimates and say, hey, we're thinking about, an amount around this for the full, they'll be in charge of whatever piece, this deliverable, this, survey, something like that. We're estimating around this many hours. Let me know if you start, bumping up against that limit, and let's like make sure that we're not, taking advantage of you or anything. On rare occasions, I end up in a scenario where I've had to pay more like per deliverable or hourly, only in cases where things are like really open-ended with a client. So I had one project where we had no idea how many folks would sign up for interviews. It could be 5, it could be like 50, right? And it didn't feel fair to me to tell my subcontractor, like, well, I'm paying you the same, whether it's 5 or 50. So we ended up landing on kind of like a per interview amount that felt comfortable for both of us. We came up with like a policy of what we were going to do about no-shows, and we kind of folded things together because she was also going to be doing the data analysis for the interview data of, okay, so that per interview price is like all inclusive of, you're taking care of, getting it transcribed through, I pay for transcription, but, she kind of did from start to finish, getting things transcribed, putting the data in our shared places, doing the analyses of the interviews. So only in rare occasions do I do a more variable, either per deliverable or hourly approach, but I pretty much always do fixed price contracts with clients, so I try to mirror that with my subcontractors.
One quick thing I noticed you said was you don't ask them or require them to do hours.
I don't.
Hours.
I think
But
everyone's
you are our queen. You are the participant. You are the person who helps me do the tracking your time session. So I'm just. What are your
because
thoughts on
I
that?
love hate tracking my time. I try not to make others bring that back. I know everyone's got different feelings about time tracking. Some people love it and really rely on it. Some people like me hate it and let it go on in the background, but try our best not to get, too bogged down in that. So I very much hire subcontractors I trust. So I leave it to them, and I want them to let me know if they feel like they're bumping up against, what feels fair, so we can stay in communication and so everyone feels good about things. But I let them track on their own. And sometimes we get in a scenario where things take, much less time. Most of the time, the approach is just like, okay, good for you. You got things done in less time. If it happens because something on the project has changed, like, oh, there's less, less happening than we anticipated. Every once in a while, I've had a contractor say, hey, let me know if you need any help with another task, or, we'll take a little bit of that time and allocate it to some other, thought partnership. I think Lily's on the call. We've done that with one of our projects where it took a little less time than we thought. So we kind of reallocated a little bit, but just making sure everyone's feeling good about what they're paid without me necessarily needing to get in the weeds, because then that takes more of my time.
Thanks, Jesse. I would say, everybody's perspective, they should know whether or not they have how much time they have available to them, and they should be tracking their own time for only your own perspective, so you're not overworking projects. Kurt, what are your thoughts on the compensation piece?
Yeah, so all of our contracts for evaluation projects are fixed price. And so we negotiate a portion of the total for the subcontractor. And what makes a difference on the portion of it is whether the subcontractor is going to be really involved in doing all of the interviews and writing up the report with minimal editing on our part, at the end, and minimal management part, then I can give them a greater proportion of the total fixed fee. There's others where we are like side by side in the meetings. So I go to some of the meetings, and my subcontractor goes to the meeting also. So we're kind of sharing our responsibilities for that grant, and then we end up having a lower proportion of the total fixed fee for that. So it really depends on how much activity they're going to be doing and how much activity we're going to be doing on how much of the fixed fee that we can allocate to them. But we always keep some back for our overhead costs, our management costs, our time, our report reviewers, things like that. Now, I do have a couple of people that I've hired to help stand up the nonprofit. though they are on hourly because they're not assigned to a project that's got a fixed price on it. But they're helping to stand up the nonprofit, and so their time is actually hourly. That's the one exception for our subcontractors.
Since I have you still talking here, Kurt, what are some of the things that you make sure you cover in your contract? We're talking about contracting. What are the things you make sure you're thinking about when you're put out a contract for them to sign? Obviously, we talked about the money piece. What's the rest?
Yeah, we have fairly standard kind of thing about the differentiation of a W-2, which is the next question, and the contractor, they're expected to use their own facilities. We're not giving them a laptop. We're not giving them an office, those kind of provisions to separate it out. Intellectual property, there's a clause or two about responsiveness. But then in the exhibit is where we list out what they're specifically going to be doing for this contract. So the main body of the contract is this fairly standard template for contracting, and then the exhibits are what they're going to do.
How did you develop that? You say it's a standard template. Did you work with a lawyer? Did you get that from like an online source? Did you get it passed along to you from
Yeah,
somebody else
it's
in
a
this
couple of
group?
it's a couple of things. Yes, passed through this group. There's some provisions there, but I adapted some things from contracts that we've had. So fairly standard prior contracts. I did not create one new because there's so many good ones out there.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any business creating their own brand new contract, although we seem to do things like that a lot. We're always adapting things. Quick note, when we do contracts, I think it's sometime in the fall, maybe it's September, the core topic. The I'm going to ask Gamani Lundquist, who is with the evaluation, who knows a lot about contracts. She's going to be supporting me with that. Beth, I just want to, I'm happy to bring you on. I just want you to know we're still recording. And so if you're fine with that, go ahead and ask your question.
Sure. My question has to do with intellectual property. Do you put that into your contract also? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kurt. Feel free to answer that since you're
Yep.
shaking your head.
Yep. It's in there. Yes.
So be more specific. When you say it's in there, what does that mean?
Oh, I would have to look at the wording. Those are the
But
parts of the
you're
contract I don't look at very often because it's the
but
exhibit and what the specific work is that I'm more important with. Part of it is, if the contractor has done things on their own, outside of the contract, I want them to keep the intellectual property, but that we get a license to use it. But things that were developed for the contract, we want to make sure that we have the rights to it. I'm not the kind to say, assign us the rights and you can't use it. It's more of a shared IP because, so many of our surveys are reusable over grants. We're pretty flexible about that. And so that anybody who develops materials for us, they can use it, use their own again. And like if they want to give a presentation on what they found, they can go ahead and do that.
Anne or Jesse, what are some things that you make sure are in your contract? Anything that perhaps Kurt said, or things that you think he didn't talk about that you need to make sure people have in their contracts with their subcontractors?
Yeah, I'm looking at one right now. So other than what I'm looking for things that he has not talked about. So, like, what are we going to do if we cancel the contract? How are we going to handle that, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a fixed, we do fixed price contracts with our subs, but what is it going to look like if we have to, shut down the project for for any other reason, or I'm not happy with them or they're not happy with me, which hasn't happened yet. What is that? What is their compensation going to be like? What else did he not talk about? Um, that they do not negotiate contracts on behalf of my company, right? You're not going to be talking to my client about this project or scope or anything like that. This may be controversial, but thou shalt not steal my clients. Like I live on a subcontracting model now that's a win-win. I've been able to help a lot of people kind of start their businesses. My company has made a lot more money now that I've switched to this model. Please don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? I don't think that's too much to ask. But some people may not like that. Yeah, I think those are a couple things that Kurt hasn't already mentioned.
So there's a kind of it's a non-compete, but it's a non-compete with your current clients.
Yeah,
Um,
well, yes. Well, hopefully, some of you can't enforce a non-compete clause. Good luck with that. But I'm probably not going to use you. If you steal my
yeah,
clients, you're probably dead to me. So,
yeah, there's a lot of relationships that are built and grow and perhaps fall apart, but developing and maintaining a good relationship with one another is
yeah.
important.
Yeah, that's that trust that you were talking about, right? Um, that's really important to me. I've never had that situation, but this is I'm already taking some notes about, oh, I want to change this, I want to change that. You asked Kurt if he'd ever had a lawyer look at his contract. I have not. I'm sure mine looks very different. I bet all of ours look very different, but there's probably there are definitely a few things that I could tighten up here. But yeah, anyway, I'll let Jess jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the vast majority of what I include has already been covered. My contracts are definitely like an amalgamation of, information I've learned from other places. So I do have a business coach I worked with at some point who shared a bazillion different templates. And she had a really nice template for contracts that I definitely, took some information from. But anytime I have a contract, whether it's, a subcontract with another independent consultant, whether I'm the prime or they're the prime, or even contracts. I'm sure you all have probably had the situation where some clients really want to write their own contract. They're a bigger organization. They've got a legal team and they're like, no, we write the contracts. And then, I'll give feedback until it's something that feels good for both of us. There are other clients who are smaller and say, no, you write the contract. But pretty much anytime I sign a contract written by someone else, I can learn something from it, right? About a new clause to mention or something where it's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea to include. Maybe the only thing I'll say that I'm not sure if we've specifically talked about that I do make sure to include is just mentioning specifically that, if you are a 1099 employee, I will not be withholding taxes for you. That is your job. There are no benefits, associated with this position because you are a contractor, not an employee. So I just make sure that that role is clearly stated. And definitely, what Anne was mentioning about, maybe it's not officially a non-compete, but I make sure to have that conversation too. So I remember starting a new project with a client I was really excited about, and a good friend of mine was going to help out. We go way back from grad school. She was going to help out with some of the work. She was located in the city where the client was located. I am not. And she's very likable. And I had a little bit of just like nervousness about like, well, what if they want something done in person? And just having that conversation and making sure everyone's on the same page where if they say, hey, we'd love some more work or we'd, like to collaborate again, that is something that she could be part of, but that it would go through my company. So, if new opportunities are offered because of, your availability, awesome. Let's figure out ways to collaborate on them and just all be on the same page.
So you started talking about the 1099 piece, which was a perfect segue. And then I want to continue that segue into common law employee pieces. So this is the difference between a W-2 and a 1099. And the reason that we have to worry about this is that W-2 employees we withhold taxes for, who pay to our state or the state where they work. And 1099 employees, we do not. We pay them on a subcontract and they're responsible for their own taxes. So there's lots of reasons why a state or a federal government entity might want to make sure they can collect taxes from a W-2. So how do you make sure, Jesse, since I have you here and you were just talking, how do you make sure you cross all those lines and dot all those I's and cross all those T's to make sure you are not going to be accused of having a W-2 employee when you in fact have a 1099 or a subcontractor?
Yeah, yeah. I think of the differentiation as, a W-2 employee is someone who you are controlling when and how they work, and you are supervising directly. Maybe you're providing training, you're really doing a lot of, um, maybe it's hand holding, maybe it's, admin, but you're very involved in some way or another. Whereas with a contractor, you say, this is what I need done, and you care about the final product, and you trust them to independently, get there. Certainly, you might have communication or collaboration, but you're not telling them these are your hours where you have to be working. You're not saying, I want to micromanage this process. I mentioned briefly at the beginning, and I'm happy to talk about this in more detail. I know I've talked about this before. My only W-2 employees are my husband and my daughter. I occasionally, we've talked about how, I get a little, off the wall with my time estimations or tracking. And sometimes I run out of hours in the day and I need some, entry level tasks done. I need some, basic data entry, some data cleaning. My husband has experience with this from back in college. I am able to actively supervise. And frequently I'll have a situation where I'll say, I'm going to make dinner. I'd like you to work on data entry for the next hour. And I would never do that to a subcontractor. Say, I need something done right now. This is exactly how I want you to do it. I want you to do it sitting, in front of me over at the desk over there. That's not how I would treat a subcontractor. That's a W-2 employee situation. My daughter is an infant, but she does some modeling for my business for our marketing materials. She is not working independently. I am, supervising and directing the situation. She's not going off on her own and doing a photo shoot, right? So those are two scenarios where I'm really providing a lot of oversight, and it feels appropriate for them to be W-2 employees. In all other scenarios, my collaborators are working independently. They have a piece of the puzzle that they're in charge of. They are folks I trust to do that work independently. We check in with each other, as needed if there's questions about that collaboration. But I don't say you need to do things during, the hours of 2 to 4 p.m. I'm a big nocturnal worker, so I like to give folks flexibility with things like that. So almost everyone who does substantive work for my business is a subcontractor, except for little admin tasks or marketing photos that my family helps me out with.
There's questions coming in, and any of you guys are welcome to answer this, but I do have to be off mute, Kurt, so feel free to answer the question about the W-2 1099. How do you, and I just put a post in there about self-employed or employee from the IRS, which I think is a wonderful resource as well. Go ahead, Kurt.
I've had no issues with it, and I don't know why. And so when I saw this question, it was like thinking back. I think it's just when I bring someone on board as a subcontractor, they're just aware of it. In some cases, they are experienced in that role, and others they're not, but they know they're not employees. The agreement is with them between the company. It's not an offer letter to become an employee. And so I really haven't had that issue. And I've never had anyone come back and say, hey, I should be an employee rather than a contractor, because we really do keep a hands-off kind of thing. And one of the discriminating features is a subcontractor able to go out and pursue other work on their own? And all of them that I have do. If they're interested in it, they all have other contracts. So I think that awareness kind of separates it right there. I do have one big contract where the first 15 months we met weekly, and it was the whole team met weekly. So that kind of sounds like a W-2, but everybody was wanting to meet because it's such a complex project for us. Now we've gone to every other week, but no one has said, gee, you're treating me like an employee.
And did you have anything you want to share about this? I just put the three categories that people for the common law rules and from the IRS document, but did you have any thoughts on this?
No, not really. I mean, I think what you're hearing is that all three of us have thought about these things, and all three of us, our structure meets the qualification that our folks are truly 1099s. Right. I may tease Jess about sending me an email at 11 p.m. But it's totally up to her if that's what she wants to work.
There's some other great questions that have come through. I see Nora's. How do you vet subcontractors? And what do you do? Are you interviewing them? Are you asking for references or work samples? How do you do that, Ann?
I don't ask for references that I can recall. The people I've had for a while
Don't you
now.
read these things and you go, maybe I should be doing that? You start
Yeah,
questioning
well,
your
that's why I said
process.
I'm definitely taking notes. So I'm going to add that. I'm going to add that because we can always learn, right? That's why we're here today. I do ask for, especially if it's somebody I do not know. I don't know their work, right? I want to see some work samples. Mainly, it's the writing. I need to know that they can write. I need to know they have good data viz skills. Because they're putting out products on behalf of you and your company, so it needs to it's got to represent you well. So yeah, that's important to me.
I'm still here. I just put myself on mute.
I'm laughing at Jess's comment there.
I didn't read it.
I didn't want to totally out you, girl.
We're at 10 before the hour, so why don't we do a quick wrap up, and that way we can get some time for some open dialogue, communication. You guys have any last thoughts? Kurt, do you have any last thoughts on subcontracting?
No, other than it really works well. About hiring them, I hire people I know, or I've met and have a good feeling for their capabilities. In this big project, I hand selected all of the contractors. Well, and actually several of our projects, I've just hand selected our subcontractors, and literally, like tapped them on the shoulder, and said, Linda, can you do this? Dorinda, can you do this? Kind of thing. So the vetting process is not something I do. Work samples, I'm more interested in doing that when we have students, student hires, interns. And I have like on my 9th student intern right now. So there, it's kind of the writing samples is important for me. Other than that,
Jesse,
nothing else.
Jesse, our subcontracting queen. You seem to be you've worked with everybody in the room, it appears,
Yeah.
and you're probably slowly hiring everybody else in the room. So what are your thoughts on subcontracting as it flows out? Last thoughts.
Thoughts. I love subcontracting on both sides of the equation. I think that it's such a symbiotic relationship to be able to learn from each other. And whether I'm the prime contractor or the subcontractor, I learn something from everyone I work with. The great thing about independent consulting is there's a million ways to, do what we do or write a report or look at data. And yeah, I try to work with people I like, and that generally pans out pretty well. It's great to have this space every week to get to know each other and kind of learn more about, oh, we should look for opportunities to collaborate, or oh, we have similar interests. So I'm a big subcontracting fan, and if I have it my way, no matter how much my business grows, my husband and daughter will continue to be my only W-2 employees because I love the subcontracting model and the ability to say, hey, I have a specific project. I can guarantee X amount of work. I don't know, what's coming next, or where the business is going to be, a year or 2 years from now. And I don't have to worry about being someone else's sole source of income. So yeah, I'm a big subcontracting fan.
We'll get that last thought, Sam.
No, I was at, Jess is one of my work wives, right? So she immediately thought that was like exactly what I was thinking. I've learned so much from the different folks that I work with, and I just love that, right? So I just appreciate them so much to what they bring to my business, what they've taught me. As the song goes, always stay humble and kind. We can always learn. So sometimes we probably all had like bad bosses situations. So yeah, try to be that great collaborator that you want to work with.
And before we go, I see Melissa's got her hand up, but I'm going to go ahead and close this down. So why don't we say goodbye to everybody? And Melissa, don't go anywhere because you're going to get your question right after we stop the recording. But For everybody who's here, stick around if you have some questions. We're going to continue to talk. Stick around. If you're in Zoom, YouTube land, we'll see you guys later.